Welcome to ChinaX Office Hours 36. I'm here with Chiang, and we are going to be talking about what's happened this past week and answering some of the questions that you've raised, looking at the word cloud you did, and we're still not certain what to do with South Pacific, the music, but we also have some of your comments we want to talk about. So
the final assessment will be released later this week, and if you're on a verified certificate track, you must finish all assessments by Monday, November 17th, 5 p.m. The certificate will be issued on Thursday, November 20th.
Well, good luck with that. We hope you get those certificates done, and let us know if you have any problems, questions. So, Chiang, I was looking at some of the questions, and I was struck by, there were a lot, and Bill Kirby is away, so we're going to wait till he gets back to ask some of them. But there are a couple that I did want to ask you, and one of them is about Chiang, Chiang Kai-shek's wife, also known in America as Madam Chiang. Did she have a lot of influence on U.S. policies on China, do you think?
I think Madame Chiang Kai-shek is a very interesting figure in Chinese history. She herself is a very transnational figure. Her family was a Christian missionary. They were successful merchants. And she herself went to Wellesley in the United States for college. And so she spoke perfect English. And during World War II, especially, I think she was very important as the face of China to present to the United States as a very strong ally. And even after World War II, I think she played a big role in getting supplies and aid from the United States to fight against the communists.
Okay, so yes, the answer to that is yes. A really, really important role. And then there's another question, also about U.S.-China relations during the Republican period. Can we quantify U.S. support for China during this time frame, support for the Republic of China? How would it compare with the amount that the U.S. was spending on the whole Pacific War or in the European theater and so on?
Right. If you look at the Lend-Lease agreement with China and the rest of other allied nations, actually the United States is spending most of the Lend-Lease on Great Britain in Europe. And China is only a very, very small percentage. But then at the same time, U.S. help to the China theater war had a tremendous influence on how Chiang Kai-shek fought the war. So the U.S. supplies to China over sort of southern regions of Tibet to Chongqing actually really helped to keep the sort of equipment and supply line open for the nationalists doing.
So it did help the nationalist government survive, even though it wasn't a major war investment. Okay. Now I think that there is a question.
There's a students have a question about after the nationalists were driven from Taiwan.
We're driven to Taiwan.
Oh, driven to Taiwan.
Driven off the mainland to Taiwan.
Driven off the mainland to Taiwan. And did the nationalist attitude toward the United States change?
Well, I think that there are a variety of nationalist attitudes, from those that are very strongly favor of American alliance, for those that are suspicious of America and its democratic values and things like this. But it's certainly true that once they were on once they were on the mainland, once they were off the mainland and on Taiwan, they did turn to the U.S. for considerable help. And in fact, the United States played a role, I think, in supporting them as they moved to change the social economy of Taiwan, and rather successfully. But it was certainly, Taiwan was always independent. It was the Republic of China, such as it was.
And another student had a question. He said Professor Kirby argues that communist victory was a surprise to everyone, including the communists. And the student argued, this is not the impression that I had.
So I think that, when I was in high school and I got interested in China, I read the same book that this person did, which is Edgar Snow's Red Star Over China. And you would think there, I walked away from that book feeling was that the nationalists were totally corrupt and that the communists were ethical, moral, righteous, devoted. And I think now we understand that the communists probably were very poor, relatively speaking, but there was terrible infighting among them, as Mao Zedong struggled to destroy his enemies and take sole power. I think that they thought that the war would be drawn out, and it's interesting if you look, and I think Professor Kirby may have mentioned this, but if you look at a map of China and look where the communist armies came from, they came out of the northeast, which had a strong economic base, an industrial base created by the Japanese during their occupation of Manchuria. And they had manpower. And those armies just drove right down. And I think that their ability to switch from sort of a guerrilla war to strong, well-organized armies was really unexpected by everybody else, but it carried them right through those battles. We had the overture to the South Pacific with some film clips, and you and I have been looking at that, and we've been saying to ourselves, why did Professor Kirby choose this? And I actually just sent him a text message to see whether, ask him to tell us. He's in Berlin at the moment, and I just wanted to see whether we got an answer. Let's see. Nope, no answer. So, but you had sort of an answer, I guess, didn't you?
Not necessarily. I'm not too familiar with this musical, but
this musical was written just around the time I was born, and so I've heard this music many times in my life. But it's set in the South Pacific, right? And it's about war. It's about love. But it's also about the mixing of Americans, in this case white Americans, with the South Sea Islanders. And I think that in 1949, if you read this movie as an American movie for an American audience, one of the things the movie is saying is that the war has changed our society. And it means that in this new society we have to recognize people of other races. And we have to learn to work with them, and even we can fall in love with them. So I think in some ways it's a movie about American racism, aimed at an American audience. So that's my... we will see what Professor Kirby says when he comes back, but since he didn't answer my text message, I had the freedom to say what I wanted to say. We had a word cloud, isn't that cool?
Right, so we have the short response question. And the question is, if war with Japan was not inevitable, then what were some of the conditions that led to armed conflict between Japan and China?
Answer number one is?
Imperialism.
Imperialism and Japanese imperialism, right.
And
what does that mean, though, to say imperialism? To say that was the, this led to armed conflict, a condition that led to armed conflict.
A state's expansion into a territory, often by force.
Okay. So the very notion of state expansion by Japan was really at the heart of this. I noticed another big one was economic resources. Why would that be a condition for war?
So when Japan sort of expands militarily, it needs to have the right amount of resources to support its development. So it looks to China and Manchuria as a
So Manchuria in particular, right? Because it's not so well developed, right? Okay. Is there a third one? I mean, it's hard. There's lots of things that are around the same size after this.
Right. Some are arguing for sort of instability in China itself during this period.
That makes sense, yeah. I would have thought that there's another part of this which paradoxically, given that Japanese imperialism is pointed at China, was Japanese anti-imperialism. That is, their opposition to Western imperialism and the desire to create an Asian or a pan-East Asian united kingdom, so to speak, led by Japan, no question about it, with Japan occupying these other countries, but it actually went together with the idea that there should be a common East Asian culture, which would be based on Chinese culture.
But later, this concept was used just as a justification.
Oh, no question. Oh, no, you're absolutely right. It was used as a justification. But it was also, in a sense, justifications are about what we want to be, right? So I would have included that sort of ideology of anti-Westernism is part of this, in fact.
I think that links very well to our next question, which is the main discussion about the clip from Why We Fight.
Oh yeah, so this was this American propaganda film for World War II, which showed something about China, and really was a message to Americans, right? So I know you did an analysis of the many comments we got on this, and you said that they were pretty much everyone was seeing the same thing. But what were the big points that people wanted to make?
Right, I think P.C. Chiang and Anson Lai and a few others, they understand the film was trying to draw parallels between China and the United States, sometimes forced parallels, and P.C. Chiang actually adds that at least some Americans wanted to project their own ideas onto the values of the Chinese to sort of see the Chinese were basically the same.
Chinese want to be like us, right? Okay.
And but a few others, like Kath, actually argues the opposite. He said even though the Americans saw the Chinese as developing toward big to become industrial Western nation like the United States, but its tone is very paternalistic, being weak compared to the United States, and undeveloped needs aid from the United States.
Yeah, so that the other part of the story must be that China wants to be like us, but China is poor and they're struggling. They're sort of a very much younger brother or child that we have to take care of. Okay.
And then there's this third trend of thoughts, Tilo, Flash, and Anchor 1. They argue that this is basically a work of propaganda. And they're really sort of whatever this clip tells us doesn't really reflect, possibly didn't really reflect what the Americans really thought about the Chinese and how they understood China at the time.
So why is America, since this propaganda is for Americans, what is the American government which makes this propaganda film trying to accomplish?
I think it's trying to garner support from the populace and possibly Congress for giving aid to China.
I see. So the real goal of the film is to persuade Americans that they should support aid to China. I see. Okay, good. There was, Nat from SF, I take it San Francisco, put in a comment that Henry Luce, who was born in China to missionary parents, set up the Time Life magazine empire. Very, very influential person. And his publications were consistently strong supporters of the nationalists and Chiang Kai-shek and Madame Chiang. In fact, Henry Luce used the power of his publications to oppose any attempt to recognize China after 1949, after the establishment of the People's Republic. But one result of Henry Luce's great economic success was that he set up a foundation called the Henry Luce Foundation. And that foundation, among other things, helps support Chinese studies and has done an enormous amount to make it possible for people to learn more about China, to study China, to have conferences, to publish books, to do databases. So in the end, Henry Luce's interest in China continues to live in that foundation. And we hope your interest in China will continue too when we see you again next week in Office Hours 37.